Congratulations to everybody in the United States. We are $38 trillion in debt. And little Xena is going to pledge her work. She's going to become a sled dog in Alaska. And then she's going to have puppies, and they're going to be sled dogs. Help pay for the debt. And yeah, we all know that the debt is not going to be paid. There's no way to pay it. And every 70 days, we're adding another trillion. And eventually, every week, we're going to be adding a trillion. And then every minute, we're going to be adding a trillion. And the true alt season has been the national debt. So there's no way out of it. Xena wants to run, but I want her getting shot by an arrow. So she can stay here for now. She's fine. It frosted last night, went below freezing, and it's still a little chilly and stuff like that. So fall is setting in, winter is coming. And what are we going to do with this debt, and how does that affect everything else? Well, first and foremost, anytime this stuff goes super expensive, and we're probably 6 years behind Japan, you know, prices in Tokyo, people kind of ran to the cities for opportunities and stuff like that. And then, you know, Tokyo real estate was, you know, through the roof, extremely expensive there. And then all that kind of collapsed down. It's still expensive in Tokyo somewhat, but that being said, the birth rates were so low and everything. Now there's 7 million empty homes. So you have the older population needs to be supported by the younger population, and Gen Z is not as big. These younger generations are not as big as what the baby boomers were, Gen X and millennials. We're not going to be able to support it. We're not going to be able to pay this debt. We're essentially paying the debt for all these money laundering wars from before we were born, before Xena was born. She doesn't want to pay for that. Poor thing. Poor thing. Just go to Alaska. But she's not built for that. Yeah, so we're not going to pay off the debt, and they're going to just do infinite quantitative easing. They're going to mess around with the rates and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I mean, people are kind of, they're realizing that we've been lied to so many times about so many things, all these wars, 9/11. You know, it's like we spawned 2 wars out of the 9/11 fraudulent inside job. And, you know, found no weapons mass destruction in Iraq. You know, shout out to our troops. Always respect our troops. Always support our troops, because they got caught in the middle of this like anybody. I mean, think about the guys who got sent to Vietnam. That made no sense. They were made to be, you know, they drafted for Vietnam. If you're not from the United States, they have to actually drafted for Vietnam. And, you know, guys got sent out to run around in the jungle, and it made no sense. We shouldn't have been over there. It made absolutely no sense. And, you know, and then obviously perpetuated forward. And then it's like we have the 9/11 inside job. And, you know, guys that were even in the National Guard that they thought they were going to be maybe helping out with natural disasters, setting up sandbags or helping with disaster relief and stuff like that. They got sent to Iraq. They're getting blown up by roadside bombs, and get sent to Afghanistan. And then after 20 years in Afghanistan, you know, we end up pulling out of there and giving it back to the Taliban, who was supposedly, you know, whatever, that they were the evil that we were fighting and we're spreading freedom. So it's all a money laundering event. And most of us kind of realize that the debt is not going to be paid. This is so egregious, you know. But I saw a thing, and it was talking about 1920. It said the British Empire, the sun would never set on the British Empire, because they were controlling so many locations around the world that, you know, it was always daytime somewhere. And you know, the British Commonwealth still exists, but for all practical purposes, they expanded themselves out of existence. And, you know, in a situation where everybody's jockeying for position, and these, she's chewing on that tree. You know, everybody's jockeying for position and for power and stuff like that. You can expand yourself out of existence. I've seen this with sports leagues. You know, I've seen this a lot with baseball leagues. What they try to do is they try to expand, and then it gets too spread out, and then it actually destabilizes some of the other franchises. And this is one of the reasons why you don't see a lot of expansion with the NBA and the MLB. You don't see a lot of new franchises really popping up in markets that have not been proven out. because there's only so far you can expand to, and you'll destabilize yourself with like further expansion. So, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like, what does this mean? You should be plotting your course. You should be plotting your exit, because there's some countries that are on the come up. I don't see how much further can we expand. I mean, what are we in? Like 70 different, we have bases in 70 or 75 different countries. We can't really expand any further. And the debt is going parabolic. So, you know, we're adding $1 trillion worth of debt every 70 days. At some point, it's going to be, like I said, it's going to be every minute we're going to be adding $1 trillion. And this is happening at an unprecedented rate. You know, we're going straight up with this. We're going straight up, and you know, they're going to try to do quantitative easing, and we just see the thing. Like I said, we're 6 years behind Japan, and you know, Tokyo real estate went through the roof. Let's say 10, 15 years ago, Tokyo real estate was way up, and you know, you'd hear these stories of guys kind of checking out, you know, just play video games in their room all day. We already saw this happen in Japan. It's happening in the United States. It's happening in China. And that's kind of just where we're at, you know. So guys are checking out. And, you know, I would say besides just kind of bed rotting and checking out, just playing video games all day, in my mind, you're better to just kind of build yourself up and look for greener pastures. I have a lot of information online. You've seen these guys like enjoying their life in Brazil, you know, going to Thailand. If you guys were on Steam It back in like 2017, 2018, you guys probably remember Yalapapi. And I actually ran into him in Thailand in 2019. He's back in Bangkok. Well, yeah, well, he's back in Thailand. I think he's in the Bangkok area right now, but you know, he's just looking at the lay of the land. He's probably going to be there for a year. But you know, he acts like in Chiang Mai. You could post up there for, you know, get an apartment for a couple $100 a month if you wanted to really, you know, live cheaper and stuff like that. But, you know, total all in, you could definitely live, you know, it's very comfortable, have internet, be close, you know, be close to things and stuff like that for, you know, $1,500 a month. You know, it's going to be cheaper in the United States. Our insurance costs are only going to go up. The health insurance, the car insurance, the property insurance, all this stuff's just going to go up. Everybody's getting beaten down, and they could be because the government shut down. If you're not from the United States, the U.S., we're shut down, whatever. And if you want to go to the national parks, just go. Just you know, whatever, get in there, leave no trace, you know, get in there, enjoy it. And, you know, at the end of the day, we're shut down. And so the big thing that's going to potentially happen in several states, I guess I just found this out yesterday, is that EBT or food stamps is going to be cut off in November. So a lot of people are crashing out about this, but even besides that, I've been seeing a lot of women crashing out like on Instagram, having communication. They're just so frustrated with guys. Like, you know, guys they're not acting right. They're not doing what they're supposed to, you know, all this kind of stuff. And, you know, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. If you guys have tried to go out to any kind of bars or restaurant, it's pretty dead. And it has been for a bit, but you know, guys are just kind of checking out the situation. Movie theaters are going bankrupt. And anytime this economic stuff is going on, and I mentioned something like, you know, one of the sleeper agents out in Tucson, Steve McClare, he mentioned that 7 Starbucks were going out in Tucson. And then people say, well, Starbucks overexpanded, or it was too expensive. Or, well, people don't want to go to the movie theaters because, you know, you know, they can just have these, you know, at-home entertainment centers with these big TVs and surround sound and all that kind of stuff. And all that's true. But I mentioned this before. Anything ancillary to dating is not a good investment. Not a good investment, because a lot of guys have just checked out. The Herculean effort that someone had to go through, these women are not impressed. I can tell you that. They are not impressed. Whatever you're doing, whatever you have, they're not impressed. If you're not willing to jump in there and pay off all their debt, their $200,000 worth of student loans or whatever, then they're just kind of disinterested. So it's only going to get worse. You're going to have a lot of resistance there. And a lot of guys are just, they're not buying in. They're kind of checking out. So Xena, she's still crying. She doesn't want to go to Alaska. She wants to run, but I don't want her to get shot by an arrow. So she's going to stay there for a second. And we're going to have full picture day for young little Xena. So at the end of the day, what's going to happen? I mean, we're going to have a decline over the next 5-10 years. It's only going to get worse. There's probably going to be a revolution or something in the UK and in Germany and France. Maybe not this winter, maybe next summer. Who knows? Could happen sooner than later. We're just seeing all kinds of stuff going out of there. It's just absolute madness there. And I think that, you know, the United States, we're kind of spread out enough and we can kind of move around for a bit. But with all this money printing, and they're going to have to try to print their way out of it, they're not going to be able to pay off the debt. Nobody's going to pay off the debt. The younger generations are smaller generations. Gen Z, Gen Alpha, those are smaller generations than the baby boomers. So we end up in the same thing as Japan, where we have this aging population, and then the younger generations, there haven't been enough people born. Same thing in Korea. We're at the same point that kind of China's at, more or less. And South Korea and Japan are sort of ahead of us in this whole thing. And then it's like they've kind of come down the other side. So now there's kind of sort of an opportunity in Japan that you could go over there and buy a cheap house and maybe set something up in Japan. At the end of the day, I think what's on the come up, more on the come up, is something like maybe a Croatia or a Poland from my research. And, you know, if that's too cold for you and everything, obviously, like, you can make the dollar still, even though we're losing value, you can make it stretch pretty far in Vietnam and in Thailand, in Bali, and in Brazil, in Argentina and stuff like that. And those places there's issues there too. That being said, you can kind of be off the beaten path and live a pretty cheap existence. So I think everybody should be plotting and thinking about your exit. And one of the only exoduses is crypto. How convenient. So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, price action hasn't been great. Things are looking kind of spooky out there. I was looking at a lot of charts, a lot of NFT projects, a lot of different things, and some stuff looks spooky. It looked kind of creepy. But where's the money going to go? People have to make a stab at the exit. And it's like the wallet, you know, obviously the Bible, you know, reference to is the Exodus. The only Exodus is going to be something like crypto. You're not going to be able to carry a bunch of gold bars across borders. Obviously, I have mentioned Paxos Gold and Tether Gold, and you know, some of this other stuff. And I do think there's some value in that. And there's not really a good player for tokenized silver. You know, it just doesn't seem like there's like a Paxos Silver, and a lot of the stuff's on Ethereum. I'd like to see it branch to other chains, and more people could kind of move in and out of it, stuff like that. But, you know, at the end of the day, some of that money, all this money printing, and people that have money, now a lot of people they're going to miss out. They're just going to miss out because life is too expensive right now. They're going to have all these bills pounding them in the ground, and just even to buy food, it's going to get, you know, people are going to kind of get desperate and stuff. They're not going to have the money. But the people that do have the money, they're going to be trying to stack, you know, crypto. And you know, I previously did a video just last week. It's like, what is a safe play? Well, you're encompassing a lot of different things: gaming, perpetuals, NFTs, DeFi, and something like Solana and BNB and Tron. And you know, even if you just were like, I don't really see the appreciation in something like a Bitcoin or an Ethereum at this point. If you're going after BNB, and obviously you have an entire, you know, the exchange behind it. And CZ just got pardoned yesterday by Trump. He was already out of jail, so I don't understand what kind of charges were still sort of standing. But CZ did get pardoned by Trump. And you know, the war on crypto is essentially over. So we are going to see more of a gravitation towards crypto, and some of these traditional financial firms connecting to crypto and offering that as an asset. I don't recommend going that way. I certainly recommend self-custody. But at the end of the day, you got to stay diversified with this stuff, and you need to have the ability to get on and off the Visa and the MasterCard network and the Discover network and stuff. You need to be able to get on and off of that, but then the crypto ATM network is going to be crucial as well. Things fall apart enough, or people get debanked, or they try to channel people to try to pay for some of these debts and stuff like that. You're going to have to be able to essentially just kind of do a spin move, and that they're not going to be able to control you or lock you down with some kind of digital ID or these kind of things. So the controls are going to tighten. They're going to try to clamp down over time. Things are going to get worse. People aren't going to be able to pay their bills. People are going to be upset. People are going to crash out. And you don't have to deal with it. You know, you can just structure your life so you don't have to deal with it as much and plot your exit. Where are you guys going? Going to Poland, Croatia, Vietnam, Thailand, Brazil? Where are you guys going? Winter's coming, guys. It froze last night and it's coming, so it's not a fun process sometimes, but hopefully you get to ride a snowmobile, ski some if you do get stuck in the winter. And protect your health, protect your wealth. Where are you guys going? Follow me on all social media, at Brian Phobos, YouTube, Instagram, Steemit, Twitter, Hive, DTube, Blur, everywhere.